Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of video games. We cover all kinds from the mainstream to the indie, so I hope you enjoy your stay, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. The cardinal virtues have all been defeated, and because of the part the Warrior of Light played in it, she has Glenard and the rest of the people of the Crystarium super excited. Between bringing back the night sky and wiping out those monsters, you've proved to be more of a hero than they could have hoped for. All except for Ciela. She had expected you to be just as much of a warrior as you turned out to be. Glenard thinks that she's just hopping on the Warrior of Light bandwagon, but whether she is or isn't, he still wants to hear the story of how you and a few hunters took down the virtues. He had expected the story to be incredible, but he had no idea how much you'd gone through to take down the 4 Sin Eaters, and he hadn't expected you to learn so much about the Warriors of Light in the process. Learning that they weren't bad guys, but heroes who nearly destroyed the world while trying to save it makes their story more tragic. He thinks that a free round of drinks and a toast to their memories is the least that he can do to honor them, but Ciela stops him from throwing away 2 weeks worth of booze in a day and sends him back to work so she can talk to you for a bit. She wants to repay your hard work by telling you the true ending to the story of Ardbert and the Warriors of Light of the First. And she wants to tell you about the villain that is the cause of everything, the one that still needs to be hunted down. She wants you to meet her at the top of the crystalline mean if you're interested, because this story isn't short and the middle of the bar isn't the best place to tell it. The Warrior of Light's curiosity gets the better of her, and she goes to meet Ciela. The woman knew that you'd come because if there's a monster to kill, you're all for it. And according to Ciela, this monster is even worse than the virtues. But before she gets you to kill it, you have to know what part it played in the story of the Warriors of Light. It's a bit odd that the barmaid knows the story, but she's the one who brought the Virtue Hunters together and dragged you into their quest in the first place. She knew what needed to be done to put an end to this horrible story, and the mystery behind why she knows this is something that'll be cleared up once she finishes. The story starts at Codger's Crook out in Kalusia, so you head out there so Ciela can continue her story. The Crook is where Ardbert first met Lamit. They were young and inexperienced, but anyone could see that they had the potential to be great heroes. But it wouldn't happen until after they had traveled and met the others of their group, like Brandon and Renderay. But there was someone else who joined them. An elven swordswoman. Of course, the stories say that there were 5 Warriors of Light counting Naubert, so why did the stories leave this woman out? That's part of the mystery, but Ciela is certain that the woman was real. Her name was Silva, and it doesn't take much for you to believe her, because when the Echo showed you the past of the virtues, the elven warrior was fighting with them. That woman was the traitor who led to their deaths. Ciela's extremely evil smile lets you know where this story is likely going, but she wants to continue telling it after you take a trip to the Fields of Amber out in Amarang. When you arrive, she tells you the next part of the tale, which covers the crimes that Silva committed to make her the villain of the story. Silva had joined the group before they met Naubert. When the group made it to Amarang, they took a job to kill a powerful beast in the mines that was causing earthquakes in the area. That was where they met Naubert, who was trying to complete the job before Ardbert's crew so he could get the reward. An earthquake trapped them all underground, forcing them to work together to kill the beast. But that didn't stop the earthquakes. The cause was a stone that Naubert had been looking for so he could save his friend Tainer, who had been lost in the rift. But the stone had so much power that it existing at all was a threat to the entire area, so Naubert had to make the hard decision to save the people who lived by, destroying the stone and leaving Tainer trapped in the rift. That one act of self-sacrifice caused him to become a Warrior of Light. He was loved and admired by all for his loyalty and dedication, which is why even after he became a Sin Eater, he still tried to save his friend from the rift. But all of this was a part of Silva's plan. She needed the Warriors of Light for the ritual she was trying to perform. For that part of the story, Ciela wants to take you to the city of swamps of Raktika. After stopping the earthquakes in Amarang, Ardbert and his crew became more famous, which made them get more work. They always looked for bigger and stronger challenges, which led them to Raktika. That was when Renderay heard that Belam Keats, the monstrous beast that had killed her old hunting partners, was nearby, so she went off to kill it on her own. She didn't go after it alone just to prove that she could. She just didn't want to put her new friends at risk. It was possibly the worst idea that she could have had, because the thing would have killed her if Ardbert and the others hadn't tracked her down. That battle caused her to be chosen as a warrior of light by Hydaelyn as well, fully binding her to Ardbert and his companions, and that put Silva one step closer to completing her ritual. Ardbert and the others were completely unaware of the fact that their fate was being guided by Silva as they made their way to Ilmeg, which is the next place that Ciela wants to take you. After taking down Balam Keats, Ardbert's crew became even more famous, so they made their way to the kingdom of Obert. The place had been dealing with the magical plague where seemingly random people were being transformed into monsters that the knights had to deal with before the plague could spread. Brandon had been one of the knights when he was younger, and he had served the Princess Saldia faithfully, but they banished him for a minor mistake, so he left the kingdom, which led to him meeting Ardbert. Since he had made a name for himself out in the world, Brandon came back to his home to redeem himself, and with his friend's help, he did. The mage Todrick had been the one turning people into monsters, and Brandon put an end to him. But the mage cast a spell on Princess Saldia before he died. There was no way to return her to normal, so she asked Brandon to put her out of her misery. Like a loyal knight, he fulfilled Saldia's final request. That led to him becoming a warrior of light as well, bringing Silva closer to completing her goal. But the story is still not done, so the two of you head to Tamra, the dwarf village. The dwarf Lamit had sought power from the ancient Ronkan ruins so she could cure her people of a disease. But her mission forced her to go against dwarven tradition. The dwarves seldom dealt with the outside world, so when the disease Stoneblight started spreading through their people, they locked the sick away and refused to get help from the outside world. Lamit's sister was one of the sick, so she left to find a cure. With the magic in hand, she went home and cured the disease. But since she had broke the rules, they banished her. She had already known that was going to happen, so even though it hurt, it wasn't a surprise. And to her, it was more than worth it. Her selflessness made Hydaelyn choose her to be a warrior of light as well, which nearly gave Silva everything she needed for her ritual. But during their travels, Ardbert and the others started to notice some odd patterns when it came to the problems that popped up around the world, and they had heard mention of the name of the one behind it all, the Shadowkeeper. It was behind everything, but they didn't know why. They just knew that if they really wanted to save the world, they'd have to destroy the Shadowkeeper. They found the Shadowkeeper in Lakeland, and that is where Ciela will finish the story. When you meet the woman in Laxenloft, she shows up wearing armor with a nice looking sword that she points at you, causing the echo to show you the past. It shows you the very moment where Ardbert and the others discovered that Silva was the one pulling the strings. That didn't mean she didn't care for them. They had become her family, but she had to forge them all into warriors of light so they could fight her. The battle would destroy the first, but it would be the first step towards saving her world, the Void, also known as the 13th Shard. Ciela had expected the Echo to show you the past when she showed up in her armor. She's well versed in the Echo since she was a warrior of light from her own world. If you hadn't guessed, she's Silva. Although that's not her name any more than Ciela is, but her real name doesn't matter anymore. Ciela or Silva, whichever you want to call her, had tried to save the 13th from the flood of darkness, but she failed along with the other warriors of light. She saw Unakalai in your memories. He was a friend of hers, and just like him, the Ascians made her an offer to help rebalance the worlds. She accepted and came to the first to help speed up the rejoining process. Since her shard was consumed by darkness, the only way to balance things out would be by filling another shard with a high level of light. But the Ascians told her that if the first was consumed by light completely, it would be just as useless as her world, so it needed to be almost totally covered by light, with just a little bit left untouched. It would be difficult to stop a flood like the one that consumed her own world, so Silva figured that she could get the massive amount of light ether that she needed in a different way. If she could gather a group of souls who already wielded stronger powers of light than others, warriors with the blessing of light, she could help them get stronger. Then, once they were ready, she would reveal herself to be a warrior of darkness and fight them. The anger they would feel at being betrayed by a friend would cause them to act very unhero-like, which would cause them to lose their blessing of light in one massive burst. Because of that surge of light, the shard would have been ready for the rejoining. The Ascians, Mitron, and Logrif were positive that the plan would work, and Ardbert and the others became as strong as Silva had hoped. They fought, but instead of flying into a rage and killing her like she had hoped, Ardbert didn't succumb to his baser emotions. He showed her mercy. Him and his companions didn't show mercy to Mitron and Logrif, and that led to the flood that nearly destroyed the first. Silva saw it all, and she's been alive for the last 100 years, unable to die and forced to just dwell on her mistakes. All of a sudden, a few years ago, her friends reappeared as the cardinal virtues. She didn't realize at the time, but the virtues had appeared when Thancred had been summoned to the first in preparation to deal with the Scions when the rest inevitably showed up. Silva thinks that the Ascians likely told Vothri to do it, and since the Warriors of Light were buried in Yulmoran territory, getting their bodies would have been pretty easy. Even though she had betrayed them, seeing her friends revived and used like that made her angry. She knew she could never make up for what she'd done, but she could at least let her friends rest in peace. But she knew that she couldn't beat them herself, so she disguised herself as Ciela and moved into the Crystarium so she could bring together a group of strong individuals, similar to how she brought the Warriors of Light together, for the purpose of hunting down the virtues. And once the warrior that the Ascians feared finally made it to the first, he or she could join the hunters and take down the virtues. In the end, her plan worked. The virtues are dealt with, and her friends' souls have been put to rest. All that's left is to deal with the monster that caused all of this. Silva wants you to kill her. Of course, the Warrior of Light refuses to kill her. Ironically enough, her crimes are no different from what Ardbert did when the Ascians sent him to the source. He was trying to save his world, just like Silva was trying to save hers, and had he been allowed to just die, he wouldn't have been there to save you in the end. Which means Silva can find a more useful way to atone for her sins too, although she has no idea how to do that. But that doesn't mean she's not gonna try. Ciela is surprised to see the Warrior of Light in the Crystarium, because she had assumed that you'd gone back to your world for good. She's glad that you hadn't, because she wanted to talk to you about the crystals that had belonged to Ardbert and his friends. After taking down the Cardinal Virtues, those crystals had ended up in your hands. Ciela wants you to give them to her. It made sense for you to keep the remnants of the heroes with you while you saved their world, but since you're going home, Ciela believes that the Warriors of Light of the First deserve to stay on the First so that their spirits can watch their world flourish. Since you weren't the only one involved with dealing with the Warriors of Light, it only makes sense that you discuss the fate of the crystals with the other Virtue Hunters. Since Giada is always looking for an excuse to drink, and the more people she has with her, that means there are more people she can trick into paying for her drinks, she goes to gather the other Virtue Hunters. The dwarf wants to get straight to the drinking, but Granson thinks it'll be better to find out what you want before the party starts. So you tell them what you know about the fallen Warriors of Light and Ciela. Learning that the barmaid is the Shadowkeeper from another world who traveled with Ardbert 100 years ago is weird even for them. Giada already knew the woman was evil, because every time she comes to the bar, she wakes up outside with an empty wallet. She figures that it has to be the Shadowkeeper's doing, when in actuality, she just gets drunk, spends all of her money, then passes out. You know, typical dwarf behavior. The question of the crystals is a simple one to answer. All of the Virtue Hunters think that they should stay with Ciela. With that settled, the party starts, which means drinks for everyone. Granson's not much of a drinker, and he takes one sip by accident and passes out. Ciela's not all that pleased about the mess that you all made, but she is happy that you agreed to let her keep the crystals. And she doesn't have to touch them to feel their memories. Memories that let her know that even after what she did, they all still saw her as a friend. Watching you and the Virtue Hunters party reminded Ciela of how Ardbert and his friends had acted when they hung out. They got on each other's nerves and made a mess in a similar fashion, but if anything happened, they always had each other's backs. It makes her wonder if things would have been different if she had friends like them on her own shard. She wasn't the only one who fought, but all of the Warriors of Light on her world did their own thing. They never worked together, even though she knew some of them, like Unakalai, who you've met on your own world. The two of them had only talked once after their world was destroyed, and she wonders if he's found a new purpose now that Elidibus is gone. Or is he just as lost as she was? She wants you to try to help him like you did for her, so you head back to the source to check on him. Urianger had already let him know what had happened on the first, and what had happened to Elidibus, but he hadn't known that you'd met Ciela, who he knows as Silva. He considers her an ally sort of, even though they weren't together for long. It's hard not to feel some type of kinship with the only other survivor of your world, and being newly made immortals gave them just a bit more to talk about. In hindsight, he thinks the same way as Silva. If they had worked together on their world, they could have saved it. But since neither of them is dead, there's still a chance to fix that mistake at least. And since the Warring Triad is gone, Unakalai does need a new purpose, and he doesn't want to find it alone, so he wants you to take him to Silva if you can, which you can do by simply pulling his soul out of his body, stuffing it into a spirit vessel and putting it in your pocket. He's heard about how you did that to bring the Scions home, and he's pretty sure they all should have died in the process, but it's not really a risk for him if what Elidibus said was true. There's very little, if anything, that can actually kill him, so he wants to try it. But you're no expert on spirit vessels, so you call on Urianger. Immortal or not, it's still very possible for Unalaq to get lost in the rift between worlds, but the boy is willing to risk it, so Urianger stuffs him into a spirit vessel, which isn't difficult since he's technically just a soul without a body, a lot like the Scions had been on the first. It makes him hard to kill, but Urianger doesn't think that having no physical body is something that can last forever. Eventually, Unalaq may need a body of his own, which could explain why the Ascians constantly possess people. That also means that you may need to help the boy get a real body one day. But for now, you head to the first, and to Beck-Luke, the Numo who can get the boy's soul out of the spirit vessel. The Numo immediately knows that you want something by the look on your face, and the dog Fae is not happy that even after all the trouble you went through the last time you brought people across the rift, you've decided to do it again. After calling you all kinds of idiot, the Numo takes the spirit vessel and goes to free Unalaq in private because the boy will show up naked and you don't want to see that. While Beck-Luke deals with the spirit vessel, you go to get Ciela, who is extremely surprised to see Unalaq since she expected you to talk to him, not bring him across the rift. The boy had told the Numo his story, and Beck-Luke was extremely surprised to hear that the barmaid was a hero from another world. After thinking for a moment, Silva actually remembers Beck-Luke from Grennis Licht all those years ago, and the Numo is more than a little curious to hear more of Silva's tale and about her world. Like the first, the 13th had heroes too, but unlike the Warriors of Light of the first, on her world the various heroes either didn't know the others existed or they just didn't care, so they fought alone, and eventually the ether of the aura site that they used to seal the primals away turned the heroes into monsters. They weren't all corrupted, but they still all fought alone even after that, and the world was consumed by darkness, the only people being saved being the ones that the Ascians chose. It was thought to be permanent, but after Unalaq heard about what you did in the Empty, he thinks it may be possible to rebalance the ether of the 13th. Of course, the Warrior of Light is willing to try, but Beck-Luke, being the more intellectual of the group, thinks that it might be a good idea to see how bad off the 13th is before talking about saving it. That's a good idea. What's not a good idea is the Warrior of Light's plan to use the Crystal Tower to open a Void Gate. Even though I would like to watch the Cloud of Darkness fight Eden, it's probably not a good idea. Beck-Luke has a less risky idea. There was a group who had figured out how to open Void Gates to summon small beasts, and you just so happen to know someone who was a part of that group, Tainer. While you go to see if he wants to help, with a very excited Unalaq tagging along, Beck-Luke goes to work on something that should let you see into the void without getting you all killed. Once Unalaq brings Tainer up to speed, he admits that it is possible to open the rifts, but not with his power alone. To open functional rifts, it took him and Nalbert working in unison. Unalaq can sense that he and Tainer have pretty much the same level of ether, so it shouldn't be too hard for them to get in sync with one another. But Tainer and Nalbert had been born and raised for that one purpose, and even then it took years for them to get it right. Unalaq still wants to at least try, and Silva has an idea that could help make the process work. She does have a crystal with Nalbert's memory stored in it, and Unalaq does have a talent for understanding the minds of ethereal beings. He's only used the ability on primals, but it should work the same on Nalbert's crystal. It works, and he's able to draw on the memories of Nalbert's training with Tainer, which should help them open a hollow. But it'll be better to not try it inside of the Crystarium for obvious reasons, so the three of you head out to Lakeland far away from people. With Tainer guiding the process, the two of them manage to open a small rift. The tiny creature that comes through is easily dealt with by the Warrior of Light, and even though it took a lot out of him to open such a small gate, Tainer is impressed that Unalaq even managed what he did on their first attempt. And of course he's eager to try again. On the second attempt they make a bigger Void Gate, and by the third they've synced perfectly, bringing out a much larger monster for you to put down. Tainer finds it odd that Unalaq's ether matched his so easily, but it seems very familiar to him. I honestly think that Unalaq is either a shard of Nalbert or a shard of Tainer himself, but whatever the reason, Unalaq is excited that they're one step closer to finding out whether his world can be saved. That means it's time to give Beck-Luke a call. The Fae has made some progress as well, so you all head to Laxenloft to try and peer into the void. The Numo shows up, and of course Silva is with him because she's eager to see her home world too. Granted, the only thing that will be going through the rift is a porksy that Beck-Luke made. Tainer and Unalaq open the rift, and as expected something comes through. This time it's a void scent that's much stronger than the others, but that doesn't mean it's any threat to you. With the creature dealt with, the Warrior of Light uses her ether to help guide Begluk's Porksy back, while the boys close the rift to prevent any more monsters from popping through. Begluk thinks that the Porksy may have the information that you need to get to work on the 13th, but it could take years to sift through it all. While Unakalai is impatient, he's been alive for millennia, so waiting a little bit longer won't hurt all that much. Since there's nothing left to do, you all head back to the Crystarium to let Sarek know just what you found out. Since it'll be years before the journey to the 13th can be made, Tainer asks Unakalai to join him and Sarek as bounty hunters who go around helping people on the 1st. Giat and the others over here, mainly because they were listening since Silva told them about her world and what you all were working on. Since the former Virtue Hunters think it's a cause worth fighting for, they form a new team of heroes to protect the 1st and save the 13th, just like the Warriors of Light before them. This concludes the story of the Void Questline. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, join the Discord, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time guys, later.